Bratwurst brands to watch out for, and 7 that actually get it right. Bratwurst looks simple on the package. Pork, spices, a casing, a grill mark. But bratwurst is one of the least regulated feeling categories in the meat case, because so much of what separates a great link from a mediocre one never shows up in the product name. 2 sausages can sit side by side under the word bratwurst and be almost entirely different foods. One built from whole muscle cuts and real seasoning. The other stretched with mechanically separated meat, soy protein, phosphates, and liquid smoke. This guide is not a hit list of companies accused of wrongdoing. Making blanket never buy this brand claims about specific real companies without solid evidence isn't something I'm willing to do. It's the kind of unverified claim that can unfairly damage a business and mislead shoppers. What I can do, and what's actually more useful, is walk you through the real, documented red flags in the bratwurst aisle, including 2 real, well-documented recalls, and show you exactly what to look for on a label so you can make the call yourself brand by brand at your own store. Along the way, I'll name real companies where there's a real source reason to, a recall, a certification, a sourcing practice. And I'll be upfront about the difference between this happened and this is a permanent verdict. By the end, you'll have a practical, repeatable checklist, the same one I'd use standing in front of a cooler full of bratwurst, plus a list of 7 brands and practices that consistently signal quality. Why bratwurst is harder to judge than it looks. Fresh bratwurst is a comminuted meat product, meaning the meat is ground, mixed, and emulsified rather than left as a whole cut. That single fact is what makes quality so variable. Whole muscle cuts like a pork chop are hard to fake. You can see exactly what you're getting. Ground and emulsified products are the opposite. They're a mixture, and mixtures can be adjusted in ways that are invisible until you read the ingredient panel closely, or, in the worst cases, until there's a public recall. There are 4 structural reasons bratwurst quality swings so widely from brand to brand. 1. Bratwurst is a shape and a style, not a legal recipe. Unlike products such as Frankfurter or Vienna sausage, which have more standardized identity requirements under USDA rules, bratwurst is defined more loosely, essentially a fresh, seasoned pork or pork and veal or pork and beef, sausage stuffed into a casing. That flexibility is great for regional recipes. It also means a company can legally call something bratwurst while using a very different mix of ingredients than you'd expect from a traditional German recipe. 2. Comminuted meat hides its raw material. Once meat is ground, emulsified, seasoned, and smoked or cooked, you cannot visually distinguish premium cuts from mechanically separated meat, trim, or connective tissue. You're relying entirely on the label and on the manufacturer's integrity. 3. Sausage is where cost-cutting hides best. In whole muscle products, cutting corners on raw material is visible and often disqualifying. Nobody buys a steak that's mostly gristle. In ground and stuffed products, fillers, water, phosphates, and extenders can be blended in evenly, meaning a lower quality product can look and even taste fine while delivering less actual meat and more of everything else. 4. Large-scale processing plants are complex systems with real failure points. Every major meat processor, from small regional producers to the largest national brands, operates equipment, casings, seasoning lines, and cooking/chilling systems that can fail. Foreign material contamination, metal, plastic, bone fragments, and pathogen contamination, listeria, salmonella, are both real, recurring categories of USDA Food Safety and Inspection Service, FSIS, recalls across the entire processed meat industry, not just bratwurst specifically. Understanding these 4 points is more protective than memorizing a list of 15 bad brand names, because the ingredient tricks and production risks move around. A brand that's excellent this year can have a bad quarter. A brand you've never heard of from a small regional smokehouse can be outstanding. The checklist is what travels with you to any store this year and next year. Real, documented incidents worth knowing about. I want to be precise here, because these are the kind of facts that get exaggerated into permanent brand condemnations online, and that's not fair to the companies or useful to you. The 2024 Listeria outbreak linked to Boar's Head. In the summer of 2024, U.S. health officials traced a serious multi-state Listeria monocytogenes outbreak to deli meat, and specifically to liverwurst produced at Boar's Head Provisions Company S plant in Jarrett, Virginia. The outbreak was serious by any standard. Dozens of people were sickened across more than a dozen states, And the CDC's final tally attributed multiple deaths to the outbreak, with dozens of hospitalizations. USDA inspectors who reviewed the plant's history found a substantial number of recorded violations in the year leading up to the outbreak, including sanitation issues. Boar's Head's recall, which began in late July 2024, eventually expanded to roughly 7 million pounds of product from that specific Virginia facility. And importantly for this article, the expanded recall list included some of the plant's cooked bratwurst and other sausage products, not just the liverwurst that originated the outbreak. What's fair to take from this? It was a real, serious, plant-specific failure, and it's reasonable to want to know whether products from that specific facility are involved before you buy. What's not fair to take from this? Treating Boar's Head as a permanently unsafe brand across its entire multi-plant, multi-category product line indefinitely. The company has publicly stated it undertook facility remediation after the outbreak. If a brand's name comes up in a recall, the useful next step is checking whether the recall is still active and which specific plant and product codes were affected, not writing off every product with that name forever. The 2025 Johnsonville Cheddar Bratwurst recall. In April 2025, Johnsonville LLC recalled about 22,672 pounds of its cheddar bratwurst, produced at its Moments, Illinois plant, after consumer complaints indicated the product might contain foreign material, specifically hard plastic fragments. This was a narrower issue than the Boar's Head outbreak. A specific product, 19 ounces cheddar bratwurst, package code B9FOD, produced February 5, 2025, rather than an ongoing pathogen contamination across a wide product range. It's still a legitimate reason for a shopper to check package codes on any bratwurst they may have frozen from that window, but it's a different category and scale of event than a multi-state pathogen outbreak. The pattern, that matters more than any single brand name. FSIS publishes ongoing recall notices for foreign material, mislabeled allergens, and pathogen contamination across essentially every major processed meat company at one point or another over a long enough timeline. Store brands, regional brands, and national brands included. That's not a reason to distrust the entire category. It's a reason to build a habit. Check FSIS.USDA.gov's recall page periodically, especially after buying in bulk or freezing product. Note the establishment number on the package, the EST ##### text, which is how recalls are actually specified. Brand names alone are too broad. Don't rely on brand reputation alone as a substitute for checking active recalls, because reputation lags real-time safety data by definition. The real red flags. What to actually check on the label. Here is a checklist that matters more than any brand list, because it works on any package at any store in any year. 1. Where meat actually sits in the ingredient list. Ingredients are listed by weight, heaviest first. On a high-quality bratwurst, you want to see pork or pork and veal or pork and beef as the first ingredient, followed quickly by water, salt, and a recognizable spice blend. If you see mechanically separated pork, mechanically separated chicken, or mechanically separated turkey anywhere near the top of the list, that's a genuine quality signal to note. It's a paste-like product recovered from bones after primal cuts are removed and behaves and tastes differently from whole muscle trim, with a higher likelihood of bone fragment contamination as a category-wide risk. This is exactly the kind of foreign material issue FSIS recalls periodically cite across many brands. 2. Water and isolated proteins as extenders. A small amount of water is normal in emulsified sausage. It helps with texture and moisture. But when you see water listed early, paired with soy protein isolate, sodium caseinate, isolated soy protein, or generic textured vegetable protein, that combination is often functioning as a cheap way to add bulk and retain water weight without adding meat. This is inherently unsafe, but it is a value signal. You're paying meat-adjacent prices for something that is measurably less meat. 3. Phosphates beyond what's needed for basic emulsification. Sodium phosphate or sodium tripolyphosphate helps sausage retain moisture and improves texture, and it's used across the industry, including by well-regarded producers, in modest amounts. What's worth noticing is when phosphates appear alongside multiple other water-binding agents, carrageenan, modified food starch, and added water altogether. That stacking is more typical of value-tier product engineered to maximize cook yield, i.e., sold weight after cooking, rather than deliver traditional, dense, meat-forward bratwurst. 4. Smoke flavor or flavor instead of actual smoking. Traditional bratwurst is either fresh, uncooked, meant to be grilled or pan-fried at home, or naturally smoked over wood in a smokehouse. Some mass-market products achieve a smoky taste and reddish color using liquid smoke flavoring and sodium erythorbate or similar color-fixing agents rather than an actual smoking process. This isn't a safety issue, but it's a giveaway that you're buying a shortcut version of a product whose entire identity, historically, is built around real smoking or fresh preparation. 5. High sodium relative to serving size. Bratwurst is never going to be a low-sodium food, but there's a meaningful range across brands. Some links run in the 400 to 500 milligram sodium range per serving. Others push past 800 to 900 milligrams. If you're comparing two products at similar price points, the nutrition panel is one of the most honest places to look, because sodium content correlates loosely with how much a product relies on brine, cure, and processing versus straightforward seasoning. 6. Casing material and description. Natural casings, traditionally hog casings, give bratwurst its characteristic snap when you bite into it and are generally associated with more traditional production. Collagen casings are a manufactured substitute, not inherently unsafe, but a different, more uniform, more industrial product. Cellulose casings, which are typically removed before the product reaches you, as with most hot dogs, are a signal you're dealing with a highly mechanized product line. None of these are deal breakers on their own, but natural casing on the label is a reasonably reliable marker of a more traditional production process. 7. Country/region production and establishment number transparency. Every USDA-inspected meat product carries an establishment number, EST #####, near the USDA inspection mark. This number is how recalls are actually filed and searched, far more precisely than brand name alone, since large companies operate multiple plants, and a recall at one plant doesn't necessarily implicate every plant making that brand's products. If a package doesn't clearly show this, or if you're buying from an importer or private label repackager where the original producer isn't disclosed, you lose the ability to check that number against FSIS recall data, which is itself worth factoring into your decision, independent of the product's actual quality. 8. Recent or active recall status. This is the single most concrete, checkable thing on this whole list, and it takes 30 seconds. Search, brand name, recall FSIS, or check USDA.gov/recalls directly before you buy in bulk or before you cook something you've had in the freezer a while, especially if you bought around a date matching a known recall window. What actually makes a bratwurst safe and trustworthy, rather than a fixed brand list, which goes stale the moment a company changes its formulation, gets acquired, or has a plant incident? Here are the 7 practices and signals that consistently correlate with trustworthy, well-made bratwurst. Look for brands, large or small, famous, or completely unknown to you, that check most of these boxes. 1. Short, recognizable ingredient lists. The gold standard is something close to pork, water, salt, spices, or name spices like nutmeg, ginger, marjoram, caraway, and a natural casing. When you can read the whole ingredient list in one breath and understand every item, that's usually a company competing on flavor and meat quality rather than on maximizing cooked yield through additives. 2. Clear, specific sourcing claims. Product of USA, specific farm or co-op partnerships, no antibiotics ever, or certified humane claims that are backed by an actual third-party certification logo rather than just marketing language, are stronger signals than vague claims like premium or old world recipe with no substantiation behind them. Third-party certification matters because it means someone other than the company itself is auditing the claim. 3. Natural hog casings. As mentioned above, this is a genuine marker of traditional production. Many artisan and regional sausage makers explicitly advertise natural casings as a selling point, and it's one of the easiest things to verify on a label. 4. Real smoking when the product claims to be smoked. If a bratwurst is labeled smoked, look for it to be smoked over real wood, hickory, applewood, oak are common, rather than relying on natural smoke flavor added to the seasoning brine. Some labels will actually specify this, naturally smoked over hickory wood. That specificity is a good sign. 5. a track record of transparency after incidents. Every large meat processor will eventually face a recall of some kind over a long enough timeline. It's a function of scale, not necessarily of poor practice. What separates trustworthy companies from concerning ones is how they respond. Prompt, clearly worded recall notices, cooperation with FSIS, public remediation steps, and no pattern of repeated, similar violations at the same facility. You can check a company's recall history yourself at FSIS USDA.gov rather than relying on secondhand summaries, including this one, as the final word. 6. Regional and butcher shop producers with direct relationships. Some of the most consistently well-reviewed bratwurst in the U.S. comes from smaller regional meat markets and German heritage sausage makers. Companies that have built their entire identity around one category product for decades and sell largely to a local or regional customer base that would notice and complain quickly about quality slips. These companies typically can't survive a serious quality lapse the way a large diversified company might, which creates a strong incentive toward consistency. 7. Reasonable, not suspiciously low, price per pound. This is a soft signal, not a hard rule, but it's a real one. Bratwurst price dramatically below the category average, especially in large multi-packs, is much more likely to rely on fillers, mechanically separated meat, and water retention agents to hit that price point. That doesn't mean expensive is always better. But too cheap to be all meat is a legitimate gut check worth applying, then verified against the actual ingredient list. A practical, repeatable buying checklist. Print this out or screenshot it. This is the part that will still be useful 5 years from now, regardless of which specific brands are on shelves. Read the ingredient list first, before the brand name or the packaging design. Meat should lead. Watch for mechanically separated anything. Check for stacked water-binding additives, phosphates plus carrageenan plus starch plus isolated proteins appearing together. 1 or 2 of these, fine. All of them together. Be more skeptical. Look for natural casing on the label, especially if you care about traditional texture. Check sodium per serving and compare it against a similar product from a different brand, not against some abstract healthy number, just against its direct competitor on the shelf. Note the establishment number and do a quick search of that number or the brand name plus recall. Before buying in bulk, be skeptical of unusually low prices in large multi-packs. And check the ingredient list extra carefully when you see them. Favor specific, verifiable sourcing claims, raised without antibiotics, a named farm partnership, third-party certification logos, over vague marketing adjectives. What about the 15 brands to avoid format you see online? You've probably seen this exact format before. 15 brands you should never buy, articles about all kinds of grocery products, not just bratwurst. It's worth understanding why that format exists and why I'm not reproducing it here in the form you asked for. That format is extremely common in a specific kind of content. Sensational. Algorithm-optimized listicles designed to generate clicks and shares rather than to summarize verified facts. In many cases, the why behind each brand being flagged is thin. An old, resolved recall stretched into a permanent verdict. A single negative review amplified into a brand-wide condemnation. Ingredient claims that are technically true of the entire category, like contain sodium nitrite, presented as if they were unique to that one brand. Or, in the worst cases, claims invented outright because a specific, damning fact wasn't available for all 15 entries. I'd rather give you the 2 real, sourced incidents that actually happened, Boar's Head 2024, Johnsonville 2025. Be honest that they don't add up to 15 condemned brands, and hand you a checklist that will actually help you evaluate whatever's in your specific grocery store's case, including brands that didn't exist when this was written, and including regional and store brands that a generic national listicle would never even mention. Frequently asked questions. Is bratwurst generally less safe than other processed meats? No. Bratwurst as a category faces the same range of manufacturing risks, pathogen contamination, foreign material mislabeling, as other emulsified and comminuted meat products like hot dogs, kielbasa, and breakfast sausage. It isn't uniquely risky. It's subject to the same USDA oversight and the same recall system. Does uncured mean it's actually safer? Uncured on modern packaging is a regulatory labeling term, not necessarily a meaningfully different product. Many uncured products still use nitrate-containing ingredients like celery powder or celery juice concentrate to achieve curing, color, and preservation effects similar to synthetic sodium nitrite. The nitrate just comes from a natural source rather than a synthesized one. If nitrite/nitrate intake specifically is a concern for you, check the ingredient list for celery powder or celery juice concentrate rather than assuming uncured means nitrate-free. Should I avoid all mechanically separated meat products entirely? That's a personal choice more than a safety mandate. Mechanically separated meat is legal, U.S. regulated, and used across the industry, especially in poultry-based products. Some people avoid it for texture and quality preferences rather than a specific safety concern. It's worth knowing it's there so you can decide for yourself rather than discovering it after the fact. How do I actually check if a specific brand has an active recall right now? Go directly to fsis.usda.gov/recalls and search by brand name, product type, or establishment number. This is the authoritative, real-time source, more reliable than any article, including this one, which will inevitably age. Is a higher price always a sign of better bratwurst? Not always, but price is dramatically below the category average, especially in bulk multi-packs. Correlates strongly enough with fillers and water weight additives that it's worth a closer look at the ingredient list before you buy. The bottom line, the most useful thing you can take from this isn't a list of 15 villains and 7 heroes. It's a 5-item mental checklist you can run in about 30 seconds standing in the meat aisle. Read the ingredients first. Watch for mechanically separated meat and stack water binders. Check for natural casing and real smoking claims. Compare sodium against a direct competitor, and do a quick recall check on anything you're buying in bulk or planning to freeze. That approach will serve you better than any brand list, because it works on whatever's actually in front of you, this year, next year, and at whichever store you happen to be standing in.